everyone. I'm Lucy. I'm the youth minister here at St James's Church, and it's really good to be asked to do another one of our midweek kind of additional thoughts or challenges for you to think about. So Ruth gave us a really challenging talk on Sunday as we were thinking and celebrating Pentecost and the birth of the church. And one of the things actually, I was listening to what Ruth said, and it was really good. And I just thought, you know what would be really helpful, possibly, potentially, I think, is to hear about a time when I've known the Holy Spirit to be there. Because the Holy Spirit came, and he came so that he would be with us all the time. If we're a follower of Jesus, and we know that, we should know that anyway, very real presence of God with us. But sometimes we forget. We forget that God really is there, that he really is with us. As much as we shouldn't forget, we do. And I wanted to tell you a story about last year. So last year I wasn't in Clitheroe, for anyone that doesn't know. I was living on the south coast of England in Hastings. Well, actually, technically it was St Leonard's. They're kind of one town really, but they have definitely different town names. I was working for a charity, a local trust down on the south coast called Christian Schools Workers Hastings. Shout out to them. I was the team leader, so I headed up all the work that we did in schools, everything we were doing, running clubs and things like that. And one of the things that we loved to do was just after the Easter break, we would run prayer spaces. Now, as you get to know me, as you begin to understand what I'm like as a person, a challenge is always very exciting for me. In fact, the more impossible the more exciting. And we used to try and run as many week-long prayer spaces in a school as possible. I think the most we did one term, so a term of 5 weeks, a week each for a prayer space, and we ran 8. So we had sort of like 2 going on per week. And it was absolutely amazing. And we did these prayer spaces in infant schools, so with nursery, reception, year 1 and 2, right up to secondary schools, where sometimes we'd even have sixth form students coming in. But we rarely changed anything in these spaces. We set them up, and we pretty much ran them the same in every setting we did it in. And it was really amazing. Last year we ran one. We'd run one before in this school. It's a secondary academy, and the theme was called Fun of the Fair. Now, Fun of the Fair was all to do with different fairground rides and things you do at the fair, but all linked into prayer and into our lives and how you can reflect and pray. And then we had all sorts of things. We made a giant helter-skelter, which particularly in the primary school, the children enjoyed rolling like play balls down the slide that we made on it. We had a Ferris wheel, we had a carousel, we had all sorts of things. But it was all to do with prayer, even though these were things that you wouldn't normally link with prayer. So we did the primary schools, and then we went to the secondary. Now, this is an all-girls secondary school. If you've ever been to Hastings, you'll know that Hastings is quite a deprived town, and even if you haven't, you might have heard it's a very deprived town. There's lots of broken families, there's lots of things going on, there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of broken people. And the girls' schools can be quite hard anyway. There can be a lot of competition going on between girls, and there's no humour from the boys to kind of break it up. You know, it can get very serious very quickly and very heated. And then you add on to that this was a Hastings girls' school, so it was sometimes very difficult being in there. And we went in. We set up this prayer space, so we would take over a whole room, and it was always amazing. It's always incredible. But when we first took the idea of doing prayer spaces to the trustees, they asked us what the point of it was, and they said, "Well, what do you do?" And we said, "Well, we set up activities, and then we let them come in. We give them a little intro, and then we just leave them to it." But what do you teach them? Well, we don't teach them anything. We leave them to it. We let them go, and there's instructions. They get on with it. Yeah, but what's the point? What if a child comes in or a student comes in and they don't want to pray? Well, are you going to make them? Well, no, because it's a space to pray. It's not a requirement to pray. They might just want to think, or they might just want to be quiet. And one of the things that we've been taught, we've gone up to prayer spaces in schools for one of their day conferences, and one of the things they said is that when you're setting this up, you're setting up a prayer space as an opportunity to pray, and you allow God to be God. You pray that God will be in that space the whole week, and then you leave God to it. You allow him to do what he does best. Get on with it. And the trustees were really confused. They were like, no, we have to organize this. We have to have a structure, okay, so they're going to come in, you're going to do an intro, and then what are you going to do? Well, then they're just going to, I don't know, God's going to do whatever. And it was really hard for them to understand that God was going to be in control of this, and we weren't going to be in control of this. And so to sort of appease them, we said, well, when they're little, we'll take them around in little groups of an adult, and they can help them with the activities. And actually that was practically quite good, because some of the things had to peg stuff up, and quite a lot of children, younger children, find the concept of a clothes peg, it baffles them, doesn't it? I mean, they try that when they're 16 as well. They still don't know what to do with them, do they? They're trying to put their clothes up. But so you have to help them with some things like that. But even things like writing down their prayers, we weren't going to write down their prayers, because it wasn't about us being able to read them or anyone else. It was about them having that time with their own thoughts and praying with God. So we put some things in so that we could get past the trustees, basically. And then last year we set up this space. That was probably the 6th year we had done them. Set up this space, and in came the first class, and these girls were amazing. We did some things. They were all going to have 2 lessons in there, so the lesson was an hour. The spaces are designed for half an hour for half a class, and then they can come in during break and lunch, but they were going to have 2 hours in there each class. So we weren't really sure what was going to happen, but they came in, we did some things, and the week progressed, and we had them in again and again. And then during the week, one day, the teacher came in just before lesson, and she said, "I'm really sorry, guys." She said, "The next class are going to be awful." We're like, "Oh, I'll be fine." She said, "No, she said, they will." She said, "They're awful anyway." But she said, "They've literally just had a fight. Like, half of them have just had a fight out in the playground. They've been pulling each other by the hair. They've been kicking each other, punching each other, like screaming. She said, what I really need to do now is just keep both half the class apart, so that the ones that have been physically aggressive aren't near each other. So I don't even know how many of them are going to come in. Like, I'm not sure this is going to work." And we said, "Well, just bring them in, and it'll be, we'll be fine." Now, one of the things about the prayer spaces is that you always pray before you open your space. You always ask God's Spirit to be there. You ask the Holy Spirit to come and to meet with the young people, the children, in the way that God knows is right to meet with them. So in came 30 Year 9 girls who had all been outside having this huge fight. You could see from the doorway, their expression said murder. They didn't want to be coming into class. And this was the first time they'd been in. So in they came, and they sat down in the intro space, and I did the intro. "Hi guys, welcome to the prayer space. I'm Lucy. Oh, some of you recognise me from primary school. That's great." So I explained that. I split them the teacher wasn't even in the room at this point, because she was talking to senior management or something out the side, but I split them up into 3 groups. I have no idea who was who. I sent 1/3 of the group off with one of my volunteers, another third off with my worker, and I had the last group. And then what I said was, we'll do a little bit together, and then you guys can just go explore. So we all did sort of one activity led with them. And then we said, "Okay, girls, we get the idea now, so go and explore." From that moment, God's Spirit took over. It was amazing. We had one of the activities was a Ferris wheel. We'd made all of these things, and there was little bowls with glass gems inside. And we'd also bought some wooden hand-carved, like a bowl thing, like 2 hands like this, and that was on the table. And the whole point of the Ferris wheel was you had to think about your brain being a bit like the Ferris wheel, and the little stones were like your anxieties or your fears or your worries, and that they were going round and round and round and round and round in your head. But they would continue to go round and round in your head until you took them and gave them to someone else to carry. And we said that could be God. You could be giving that to God. Now, this wasn't a church school. Quite often we didn't work in church schools, so we had to allow for them to say, well, actually, I'm going to give it to my parents, which they're up to their own opinion. So we asked them, they did this if they wanted to. Well, we stood back. I think there was 3-4 of us adults in the room and the teacher. And once we let them go and explore, with the older ones, we would just sort of stand around and gauge the room. And these girls were going up to this Ferris wheel. And all they were meant to do is take one, stop and think, pray, and put it in the hands of God and walk away. These girls were going and taking one, and then finding a beanbag or a cushion, sitting down with it and praying about it. And then they were talking to their friend about their stone and praying with each other. And then gradually they would cry, and then they'd go and put the stone away and breathe and move on. By the end of that hour session, we had, without us doing anything except like that first activity with them, we had students, every single student in that class, who remember before they came in had been kicking and screaming and punching each other. They were sitting in groups of 3 and 2 and 4, all around the room. Some were just sitting and drawing on some paper. Some were lying down and just having that quiet time. Quite a lot of them were praying together. And the way we set the room up was we have like a perimeter of fabric that would go around the room. And then behind the fabric, we'd have all like our storage stuff and things like that. And so during this time, it's quite dark in the room, the way that I would do. I'd gone behind to get some bits to put out, some more paper and stuff. And there was this group of sort of 3 or 4 girls sitting along a balance beam, which was one of the activities, with blankets. I don't know where they got these blankets from. They just found these blankets somewhere in the room as part of our kit somewhere. And they were sitting and they were sharing with each other things that were going on, and then praying for each other. And I just stood behind this fabric and earwig just for a second to see, what they were doing. And when I came out of the room, came back into the area, into the room, I just looked, and all I could see was God's presence, His Holy Spirit, just mingling with every single student in that room. And from talking to them, to kind of gauge where this was coming from, I think there was 1 student in the room that had any sort of church connection. None of the others went to church, had been to church, had gone to church primary school. What happened was completely God, completely Holy Spirit. The teacher, who isn't a Christian, she's absolutely wonderful though, she couldn't believe that hour of those students who had been trying to kill each other, but were now praying with each other. That's what the Holy Spirit does. You see, he doesn't need us. He goes with us, but he doesn't need us. And sometimes we forget as Christians that we don't need to be scheduling and planning and making sure everything's going to work, when actually sometimes we need to take a step back from that. And we need to say, God, you do it. And allow him to be God. And allow the Holy Spirit to go and meet with those people, to meet in that situation exactly how he needs to. So that's just one story. I mean, I could tell you hundreds of stories about times when we as a team would just stand, whether it was at a club or at an assembly or whatever, and we would just be in awe, in absolute awe of what God was doing. So that's just a story to encourage you. The Holy Spirit doesn't come to make it hard work for us. He comes so that he will do it. He will light the flame. A bit like a story I heard preachers speak of before. I think it was at Soul Survivor a few years ago, and he was saying how his little girl loved to light fires, but she didn't have a strong enough breath to blow at the bottom of the fire. And she would stand at the fire and go, and of course nothing would happen, except the fire would light, because he was standing behind her, going. That's just what God does with us. He knows that we're going to stand at the fire and go, but if he goes with us, the fire will light, and we will see people come to know Jesus and have those experiences with God, because it is him that does the work, but he lets us be involved. So that's all I wanted to share. A little story for you from my previous life as a schools worker. Some encouraging thoughts there. Take care. God bless. Bye.